Welcome back to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this every Tuesday. No, let's try again. We do this every Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel. And I just share some perspective on making music. This started as a live stream and has gone through a couple of variations on the theme, or at least different titles. Starting on the mainstay Facebook page is Pandemic Piano, moving over to my Facebook page is Inside the Process, and now here on YouTube as My View from the Piano Bench. Hope you find this interesting, informative, useful, or something. Thank you for all who provide support and encouragement via the means available on the support page of my website, and you'll see the link in the description to this video. Much appreciated. So, today's topic, my mind is, that's not the topic, my mind, that should be a topic. Oh, that's because I have this hidden here. So this is going to be a continuation of something I did a few weeks ago, In and Out of Range, which was talking about the ranges of orchestral instruments that are presented on the piano and how that influences how I play. It might give you some ideas or thoughts. And again, whether you are a musician or not, hopefully, anybody can find something useful here. That's at least my intent. So In and Out of Range was 3 weeks ago, if you want to go back and look at it. I have not done well lately, and I'm going to try to remember this week to catch up, listing the videos in a playlist accessible on my website page for this series, but they are all on YouTube, so you can search them easily enough. So today, all about that bass, having nothing to do with Meghan Trainor or Postmodern Jukebox, which is my favorite version of that tune, and many people I know's favorite version of that tune. But we're going to isolate now the bass function. Out of the different orchestral instruments. Oh boy, yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Maybe not fun for me, but maybe funny for you. Who knows? We're going to isolate the function and the instrument, the sound, the range. If you watch the other stream, you may remember I pointed out that the instruments that cover that section of sound and serve that function in ensembles all have the same range. They all cover the same notes, and that will be, I guess, apparent. The bass saxophone, the double bass, upright, electric bass, tuba. So here are the bottom 4 strings of a bass guitar, which are the 4 strings of an acoustic guitar an octave lower. Right? And then the easiest way to visualize this is if you are watching somebody play guitar and they move up the neck, of course, and those get higher. So if you take those open strings and bar them up 12 frets, an octave, that's what it'll sound like. There's your range of your bass guitar. So that's essentially your range for bass notes, all in there someplace. And I don't know if I went below this E or not. I think I mentioned this, that I have this I guess, a little guardrail in my head. And sometimes I'll purposely go over it because I know I won't go over a cliff in this case. But this is the lowest note I tend to play when playing bass lines because that's the lowest note the instruments can play unless the upright bass has an extension. So the function of the bass is one of definition. I'm going to talk about this more later, so I'm getting ahead of myself slightly, but I'll at least introduce it now. Today, the idea of the chord is the prominent thing in everybody's mind, especially because everybody plays guitar and everybody learns chords, right? But I keep coming back to that in a long scheme of history, the idea of the chord is still a relatively modern construct, the way we understand it now, right? In the early 1700s, right? That's when our modern concept of a chord was conceived. Prior to that, harmony was all about relating things to the bass notes, the low notes. And for me, and I don't really think about it consciously unless I have to talk about it like this, that works for me better than the semi-intellectual thing of trying to, center things on what the chord is. It's like, what's the foundation? What's this built from? And then you build something on it. So first thing I'm going to demonstrate is that the bass notes, the foundation notes, actually define the harmony implicitly without the need for a chord. Now you have a texture issue where you want to hear more notes and the chords make explicit what is implicit, right? But actually what I just said is true even if you play the melody alone. So a melody fitting of this week on the calendar. I'll stop there. Now, I guess I need to define a little bit how I understand harmony. And I guess I haven't actually done this yet in this series, which is the idea of tension and release. So I'm making a note for myself so I can not look here and never see it, but if I do, I'll remember that I want to talk about this probably soon. Because everything in music supports the idea of this ebb and flow, right? Everything that happens is about that. Actually, everything that happens in life is about that. It's about those things which propel us forward and in many cases actually demand that we go a certain direction. The ship is steered by things that happen. And in music, the ship is steered by the specific notes you play in a context that points you someplace. Like, huh? All right. Now, could I have gone someplace else besides here? Yeah. And it may have been okay, but it may have absolutely not been okay. I mean, this, of course, that was a specific sort of reference that you already knew. But you get the idea that sets up something. And that's the tension, release. I should have played the tension louder because it's tense. And you play the release softer because it's, right? So anyway, you can hear that in the melody of Danny Boy. See, it's, you know, it's not completely released, but it's sort of resolved, but now it's moving. It hasn't really fully resolved, but it's got this ebb and flow. Here, and there you rest, right? So what the basic foundational bass notes are going to do is reinforce that. Now you sort of have that. And I just used 3 notes. I just did it with, if you're familiar with this concept, 1, 4, 5. But then what happens is we establish the foundation, the basic blueprint of how things move, and then we begin to nuance it. And we can do that with just bass notes. Now you really can nuance it with note choices in your chords, but you can absolutely start making things more intricate just by how you define it underneath. Now, wasn't that cool, right? Now, those bass notes, I guess full disclosure, not every one was 100% about defining. A couple of them were about the movement, but they were still defining, right? So now we're moving toward just the continual sort of opening up of possibilities. And the possibilities are kind of endless. Technically, they're not. But practically, you know, really they are. And musicians are finding them all the time. And in contemporary harmony and contemporary jazz, it's kind of in the ears of at least some people gone off the rails. But in the ears of those who are really drawn to that, it's just all beautiful stuff they're exploring, and we're all just in different places with that. But this is the basic concept. So now let me just add a little bit to it. In fact, I'll kind of fill in some of what the harmony was implied, the defining notes were implying. And I won't even remember exactly what I did, but I'll do something like what I did. now wasn't that cool? And then one thing just sort of feeds another. But what I think that helps illustrate is that for me, those defining notes fuel everything else. And for a lot of contemporary musicians, a more like theoretical approach to the chords, not taking anything away, but like a more intellectually based thing, which is not my thing. I understand this stuff, but that's, for the most part, but it's not my path to it, if that makes sense. But anyway, that was fun, and actually slightly more at times adventuresome, slightly maybe, than I typically do harmonically, just because I'm thinking about like where can I go. But players who really are like, chord extension, modern harmony, theoretical constructs, other systems savvy, would have even gone a lot further. But I think that makes the point. Now, the bass note is a defining foundational note, but the function of the bass is also rhythmic. The bass player in a rhythm section is really an extension of the drummer and locks in the time. And an argument could be made, and I mean, it's almost not an argument, it's just a thing. It's just saying that really the most important thing about the bass player, beyond the note choices, unless we're not playing in tune or place, stupid note choices, is time, locking in the time. And of course, you want to lock in a time with solid note choices. And then when you have these innovative, cool note choices, then you're taking it to the next level. But it's about the time. So years ago, I went to one of the Mediri Brothers big band gigs back when the big bands were still working a lot. And the Mediri Brothers big band was, one of the workingest ones in the region. So we got to do a lot of stuff. And there was a new bass player. And I met him. He sat right next to me in the rhythm section. Like the first thing he said to me was, "My job is to make the time feel good." And I looked at him and said, "I love you." Right? But it's of course about a balance of all that, right? So let me actually postpone that for a second, because I just see I jumped ahead of myself. And no, actually not. Let me just set it up. Let me play another tune. It'll have a little more going on, a Beatles tune. And let me lay the foundational bass notes just as sustained notes first. And I may play some notes in between. I don't know what I'm going to do. And yeah, a little more going on at a basic level there. You could have simplified that more, actually. I could have done it like Danny Boy, but I would have simplified it beyond where the Paul McCartney, Lennon McCartney starting point was for that. But now let's add a rhythmic element. Realize that I should point out the rhythmic element would at first be understood as just you're playing the notes I play, but playing them in a particular rhythm that supports the feel. But for me, the rhythmic element and the note choices, aren't separated. Wow, that was terrible. Okay, so I'm moving around and stuff as much motivated by rhythm, and really more so probably than anything else. So let me play it again, and maybe I'll fill in some of the space here. Let me just make sure I look okay. I'm going to let that stand, although parts of it were a little wobbly and imperfect, but I think you get the idea there. So I'll reference, I think, the first installment of My View from the Piano Bench, which is one-man rhythm section. And now that's what we're sort of getting to and tying to. So the bass function is now a part of all these things that are going on. All right, so let's demonstrate that again through a wonderful standard tune that offers lots of possibilities, both, well, harmonically, I'm not going to change it. It's harmonically wonderful, all the things you are. Of course, I say I'm not going to change it. Who knows what I'm going to do? But I'm going to give it different rhythmic underpinnings. I'll play it rubato, I'll play it out of time, then I'll put it in time, and I'll probably play it in 3/4 like a waltz, and then like a little bossa nova-ish, and then but anyway, let's just see what happens with the bass notes. Rhythmically and harmonically are like, what you build everything on, defined by what the melody is. So hopefully that makes sense. Simple downstairs and I'm having a hard time. Make the time feel good, right? to the extent it works for me to think about things as I'm playing, I tried to illustrate things down here, and hopefully you were able to, especially if you're listening on something other than just a phone, because bass notes are just not going to come through little tiny speakers like that. So you want to use, decent headphones or decent speakers or something to really hear the bass. But you knew that, and I didn't have to tell you that. Hey. Oh, my goodness. So many thoughts in my head right now. Let me just keep going. So here's where I wrote down what I've already came out and said that historically bass notes define harmony. The chord, as we conceive of it now, was theorized by Rameau, a French Baroque composer. So in the time of Bach, he took the increasing complexity that was happening with the idea of organizing harmony by looking at the interval relationship to the notes you're playing to the bass notes underneath. And he, did sort of a next level system, which was really necessary. And even though it would be considered, by some archaic to build a modern foundation on Rameau's chord theory, it really isn't. It just doesn't have all of the, juicy tidbit stuff that we've grown accustomed to hearing. But the essence of what's going on in music we're going to play is absolutely all there. So let me give an example of a bass note defining harmony. And I'll play the bass note by itself, and you'll recognize where this comes from. All right? So let's take a melody to it. Like it would have been done. And then it just goes on. What I'll do is jump off of that, who knows where. Those are the chords as we would understand them today. I'm moving down an octave. I'm going to stop there. So when I introduced the chords, and a contemporary player would look at this as D, A, B minor, F sharp minor, G, G, or E minor, and A, 7. Right. So when I introduced the chord tones, I actually added to the rhythmic element of the bass. I was trying to, funkify that a little bit. Because of course, a guitar player in the rhythm section is rhythmic too. Rhythm, section. So the rhythm section is about defining things harmonically, or laying down a foundation harmonically and rhythmically. if that makes sense. So to say that we defined things in a contemporary musical sense in terms of chords is kind of saying the same thing as we define it in terms of our bass notes, because our bass notes are the foundations of whatever chords are happening. But there's a subtle distinction in there in terms of emphasis. And I've come to understand, and actually preparing this has helped me to even better understand, that my conception comes from the bass notes, not the chords. And in a gig situation, it's really, really common for, like, one person in the band not being familiar with the tune. So, they can probably hear the changes, but they might be struggling. You can feed them the changes as you go, A minor, D7, G sus, blah, blah, blah. If I'm in that position, I almost don't know how to play what I'm doing. It's really, really hard for me, because it pulls me to not only a different spot in my brain that I'm using, but different references that I'm actually using to, give out the chord changes as you go along in a tune. And this is a really common thing, and the musicians don't typically struggle with it because they internalize the chord changes, the, thing that you actually think about, and I typically do not. Or I use them to get there, and then I completely forget them because I'm accessing it, through what it feels like. So that just throws me all over the place. But I think I'm unusual that way. But related to that, I wanted to say that actually remembering, or at least stating, because I only really implied this, that the bass notes, the harmonic function is really implied by the melody. The melody dictates where it goes, right? So ultimately, you trace it back to the melody, and I can easily get lost in a tune. And I don't care how much I play the tune. I can get lost in a tune if I'm only thinking about the harmony, even if it's the bass notes, but especially the chords. And this is a little inside baseball here, but I'll give away a little secret here. If I'm in a rhythm section and I'm confused about what to do, I will just silently, or sometimes very softly, start playing the melody behind what's going on so that I can reorient myself. Without the melody of the tune, I can be easily lost, which is why, certain avenues of jazz improvisation, like, modal things and things not dependent on, playing a pre-structure. Of course, I could create a structure, but something is purposely designed to be just to play on the scale for 32 bars. I just might get up and walk away. And it's, I think, a combination of temperament and interest and, where and experience and where I spent my time. But I love navigating around the nuances and the tension and release, and it's a pretty traditional approach, but I'm okay with that. So, yeah, easier for me to imply chords. Oh, okay. Next thing to bring up. And this is a bit of another subject about arranging. And I don't know that I did it in this series. There's one in Inside the Process called Making Arrangements that you can look for. Not all the Inside the Processes are on YouTube, however, but you can find them on my Facebook page, archived somewhere. Unless I just have this sort of, fit of orderliness and erase and back off some of them that I don't like. But do I distract myself? I absolutely do. So when you are playing, you can't play all the notes that a band would play if you're playing solo piano. And I do more than most because I like to run the bass lines, and most contemporary players don't. They have another approach. But even then, you're still leaving things out which is okay because you can imply the missing piece. So let me give an example, and this is something that it's a more typical approach to jazz as is taught, particularly today. So, was anything missing there? Well, yeah, but no. Missing in terms of like texture and, rhythm and interest, yeah. But as far as like having a sense of what was going on, it was just a thin approach because I'm playing the chords, more or less, in my left hand, and I'm doing what most every contemporary jazz pianist will do, implying the bass, leaving room for the bass player to show up or not, right? I didn't learn that way. I can't do it that way. But that's an example of implying the bass. I prefer to imply the chords. And I tend to try to like grab some with my right hand. I'll try to minimize that, but here. Let's try it again and hopefully better. Of course, I like that better because also I can put the time to it. I can walk it, and it's just my particular sort of polyphonic brain temperament. The multiple things are always happening at once, which is what they call attention deficit disorder. Okay, I'm going to take this detour. Attention deficit disorder. And I really dislike the word disorder. It's wrong. The way it's used is the difficulty of moving out of that polyphonic brain state to focus on just one thing while all the other things are dancing around. And a friend of mine years ago who took one of the ADD meds, and I think I mentioned this. I'm going to talk about it. I'm making notes to talk about this, and I did for a considerable time as well. How he described it is that all those things that are swirling around actually like come closer to you and kind of organize themselves, so you can grab one easily and hang on to it, and that's a good illustration of it, but the polyphonic brain, and I've never used that phrase before, but I'm liking it. The polyphonic brain has a different approach, and it struggles to keep just one thing in front of it. But then I would say that people who typically only have one thing in front of them would benefit from those other things being in view, because that's context, right? And when you're looking at any one thing, you're looking at it potentially out of context. But context is everything. Text is what defines what's going on. And that's my, I guess, the blessing and the curse of my view, that I can't look at something without context because I won't even know what to think about it, right? The context is everything. And now, speaking of ADD, I'm distracting myself, and I could use this as an illustration. I hadn't thought of this. Context. So one of my not too proud driving moments, driving a car, I mean, was when I was probably still a teenager and driving myself to college one morning. And I'm coming up to an intersection and I see the light is red. And I started thinking, red's pretty. I like that. You know, nice color. As I'm driving into the intersection, and I only realized that I kind of messed up when all these cars are sort of near me and they're honking at me. Unfortunately, I did not cause an accident. It didn't dawn on me to associate them. Yeah. So yeah, context. So if I just pick one thing and ignore the context, I might pick the wrong thing. Oh my goodness. So where was I? Yeah. Now I don't even know what I was talking about. Except I have no idea. So let's just go on. So I think I play. Yeah, let me just do like a take the A train. There we go. So there you go. There's a nice little walking bass line, rhythmic feel, implying harmony, overtly stating harmony, having like one movement of one thing impact the other movement of the other thing. Everything is interrelated. So whatever I was trying to say before, that I completely forget, context. There you saw some context. So the last thing I'll talk about bass function is articulation. And this is actually something for all of the orchestral instruments that you're going to try to recreate. To the limited extent that you can, the piano is helpful in some regards and not in others in terms of articulation. You want to have the approach of playing the note. You sound like the thing that you could say imitating, but really you're suggesting something. Now, yeah, when I walk bass lines, particularly when I use my keyboard, which I do if I have to, with a two-man rhythm section thing where my left hand is dedicated to playing a electric bass sound, yeah, I'm going to, part of that context in my head is making it sound like that string is being plucked, which the piano, gives you an advantage, or makes it easy because there's a strike. It's not a pluck, right? But the way I approached those notes was different than I would approach, something that's more lyrical. So there's that rhythmic thing. And for the most part, I'm articulating a bass, right? But one of those bass instruments is a tuba. And particularly in the older styles of music, well, marches for sure, and then the early jazz and the trad jazz, or what we used to call Dixieland, and stride piano and all that. Melody go. Here we go. So I kept losing my focus, and I'm trying to articulate like a tuba player, and then I'd forget for a phrase or a bar or two or something, and then I remember and I go back to it. So that was inconsistent, but still. Right? And you get the feeling of that because of how I play the notes, how I articulate them, how I strike them, how long I hold them, what technical position my hand is in when I play it to facilitate doing that, right? And the approach of stride piano, where you're alternating, and it could be an upright bass too, but it could also be a tuba. So let's see if I can project that, and again just illustrate the absolute importance of bass in the rhythm section. And I'm doing the one-man rhythm section thing, but that's sort of my thing. If it's more of a straight line, I won't be able to draw it. Tuba, right? Ooh, low. you go. Keeping out of mischief now, or maybe getting into more mischief now or later or something. Okay, so rather than end with the direction I wrote down, except I just forgot what I was going to do. Yeah. We'll talk about the strap piano concept a little bit, which is a subject all to itself. But in the end, the last chorus, I let myself go the more defined stride piano route. You know, you can say stride piano is just about striding back and forth. I mean, it's a developed thing, and a big part of that is learning to do tenths in the bass note, or the third of the chord an octave higher, which my hand can barely reach. But it kind of harmonizes the bass note, right? And so it's a good thing to point out here, I guess, as just a general concept, that when you are playing piano and you incorporate bass notes, it's not just a simple, play a bass note with one hand, do something else. There's all these, ways that you get it in, and stride piano allows you playing multiple notes with the bass, which is like. That was on purpose. A funny thing happened on the way to the downbeat. I'm mixing up tunes now. Where'd that come from? I don't know. This is a time of day I don't usually record videos. It's the time when my all the clouds are still forming and wafting around upstairs, and I may actually look at this because I'm curious as to what happened. I always appreciate feedback and comments, and some of you, Linda, Len, and others are, really good about that. So if you know how to find this, you will know. I can easily figure out how to email me. Thank you for your involvement and engagement. I don't get a real wide reach with these videos at this point. I'm not necessarily even looking for that. So I'm not doing some of the things that I guess you would do in order to make sure like everybody sees you and promote and blah blah blah. I'm content doing this with the engagement that's there as long as there is engagement. That said, I may decide to promote something or whatever. But a long-winded around the barn, typical Joe way of saying that if this is working for you and you're engaged with it, even if there aren't too many of you, if that's the case, that's going to make me keep going because I really enjoy this. So anyway, thank you so much. Join me tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends. That means you. Thank you.